I'm Cassandra Morgan, 34, and I just returned from a business trip to find my safe wide open and empty. The $500,000 in government securities I'd carefully invested for retirement, and my mother's cancer treatment gone. Growing up, I always protected my little sister Rachel, taking the blame when she broke Mom's vase, lending her money she never repaid, even delaying college to help raise her. Now I stood staring at the empty safe, realizing the truth. My own sister had cleaned me out completely, and it was just the beginning of her betrayal. Before I dive into this nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever trusted someone who betrayed you. Trust me, you'll want to see how I fought back against my own blood. Rachel and I grew up in a household that fractured when we were young. Our parents divorced when I was 12 and Rachel was 9, leaving our mother to work 2 jobs just to keep the roof over our heads. Dad moved across the country and started a new family, sending child support checks that barely covered groceries. As the older sister, I quickly stepped into the role of second parent, making meals, helping with homework, and making sure Rachel had some semblance of a normal childhood. This meant sacrificing my own opportunities. When I received a partial scholarship to Cornell University, I turned it down to attend community college while living at home. Rachel needed stability, and Mom needed help. I worked nights at a local restaurant while studying finance during the day, determined that our family would never struggle for money again. After graduating, I landed an entry-level position at an investment firm where I absorbed everything I could about financial management. While my friends spent their 20s enjoying life, I worked 60-hour weeks, invested aggressively but smartly, and slowly built a secure financial foundation. By 30, I had purchased my own home, a modest 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood with solid investment potential. Rachel took a different path. She dropped out of college after 2 semesters, cycled through retail jobs, and developed a pattern of financial chaos. She would call me regularly, needing money for rent, car repairs, or to cover bounce checks. I always helped, believing she just needed time to mature. When she was 28, Rachel went through a messy divorce from a husband who left her with nothing but debt. Against my better judgment, I invited her to move into my spare bedroom just for a few months to get back on her feet. Those months stretched to nearly a year, during which I covered most of her expenses while she claimed to be looking for work. Then came the news that shattered our already fragile family equilibrium. Mom was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. Her insurance would cover some treatments, but not the experimental therapy her doctor recommended as her best chance. The estimated cost, $300,000. I had been saving and investing carefully for years. Working with a financial advisor, I converted a significant portion of my portfolio into government-backed securities that would ensure the money would be there when needed. These weren't just random investments, they were Treasury inflation-protected securities, specifically registered in my name and designed to be ultra-secure. Along with my other investments, they represented my life's work, over $500,000 that would cover both Mom's treatment and eventually provide for my retirement. The safe I kept them in wasn't ordinary either. It was a heavy, fireproof model I had professionally installed in my home office closet, concealed behind a false wall. The combination was known only to me, or so I thought. I remember Rachel asking odd questions about my financial arrangements when she lived with me, but I dismissed her curiosity as genuine interest in becoming more financially responsible. In the months before the theft, I noticed Rachel behaving strangely. She would call asking about my work schedule, drop by unexpectedly, and seem disappointed when I was home. She introduced me to her new boyfriend, Matt, who kept asking peculiar questions about my job and investments. Once, I caught him studying the layout of my house with unusual intensity. Still, I brushed aside my concerns. This was my sister, the girl I had raised almost as my own child. The person I trusted most in the world. How do you suspect something so terrible from someone whose diapers you changed? How do you imagine that the person you protected from schoolyard bullies would be plotting to destroy your life? You don't. You ignore the red flags because family is supposed to be the one relationship you can count on. I was about to learn how wrong that assumption could be. The day I discovered the theft remains burned in my memory. I had been in Chicago for a 3-day financial conference, returning home on a Thursday evening. Everything looked normal as I pulled into my driveway. The lights were on a timer, mail had been collected by my neighbor as arranged, and nothing seemed out of place. The first hint that something was wrong came when I noticed the hall closet door slightly ajar. I'm meticulous about keeping doors closed, a habit from childhood that my mother instilled in me. Still, I thought little of it until I walked into my office and caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne, a spicy scent I didn't recognize. When I opened my closet to hang up my laptop bag, I saw it. The false wall panel that concealed my safe was removed and propped against the wall. The safe door hung open, the interior completely empty. The security certificates, the emergency cash, the family jewelry passed down from my grandmother all gone. My first thought, ironically, wasn't Rachel. I immediately called the police, convinced I had been burglarized by strangers. The responding officers found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows or picked locks. They asked if anyone else had a key to my house. Just my sister, I told them. But she wouldn't. The doubtful look the officers exchanged spoke volumes. After they left, promising to file a report but offering little hope, I called Rachel with shaking hands. The conversation plays on repeat in my nightmares. "Hey Cass, how was Chicago?" she answered, her voice artificially bright. "Rachel, my safe is empty. Everything is gone." I tried to keep my voice steady. A pause. Too long. "What? Oh my God. Were you robbed? Did you call the police?" "There was no break-in, Rachel. No one forced their way into my house." Another pause. "What are you saying, Cass? I'm asking if you know anything about this. $500,000 in securities is missing. Mom's treatment money, my retirement. Everything. Are you accusing me? Your own sister? I can't believe you." Her voice rose with practiced indignation. "I'm not accusing. I'm asking." "Well, I don't know anything about it." "Maybe you should look at that sketchy neighbor of yours instead of pointing fingers at family." She hung up before I could respond. 10 minutes later she texted, "I'm at Matt's. Don't contact me again until you're ready to apologize." I drove to Matt's apartment in a daze, the 40-minute journey passing in what felt like seconds. I had been to his place once before for a dinner that had felt forced and uncomfortable. It was in a surprisingly upscale complex for someone who had told me he worked in sales. When I knocked, Rachel opened the door just enough to glare at me. "You have some nerve showing up here," she said. "I need to talk to you," I replied, pushing the door open wider. That's when I saw them shopping bags from luxury stores piled on the coffee table, a new laptop still in its box, and Matt quickly closing what looked like a travel website on his computer. "What's all this, Rachel?" Sudden shopping spree. "Matt got a bonus," she snapped. "Not that it's any of your business." Matt stood up, positioning himself slightly in front of Rachel. "I think you should leave, Cassandra. Rachel's upset by your accusations." "I haven't accused anyone yet," I said, noticing how his hand kept touching his pocket nervously. "But it's interesting that you both seem so defensive." "Because you burst in here acting crazy," Rachel shouted. "You've always been like this, controlling, thinking you know better than everyone else just because you have money. Well, maybe not everyone wants to live like you, counting every penny and never having any fun." The neighbor across the hall opened his door, peering out at the commotion. "Lower your voice," I said, suddenly aware of how this looked me, in wrinkled travel clothes, confronting my sister and her boyfriend in their doorway. "Or what? You'll cut me off?" Newsflash, Cassandra. I don't need your charity anymore. I never did. You just needed to feel superior by helping me. Matt put his arm around her shoulders. "I think you should leave before we call security. Rachel doesn't owe you any explanations." As I turned to go, Rachel called after me. "By the way, if anyone asks, tell them you gave me that money." Who do you think people will believe, the controlling sister who always holds money over everyone's head, or me? I drove home in shock, her threat echoing in my mind. When I arrived, I discovered my house had been disturbed even further. Drawers in my bedroom were partially open, My file cabinet had been rifled through, and my laptop, which I hadn't taken to Chicago, was missing. This wasn't just theft. It was a systematic attack on my life, orchestrated by the person I had sacrificed everything to protect. The next morning, I called our mother. Despite her weakened condition from preliminary cancer treatments, she deserved to know what was happening. I tried to be gentle, explaining that securities meant for her treatment were missing and that I suspected Rachel might be involved. "Cassie, honey, are you sure?" Mom's voice was thin with fatigue and disbelief. "Rachel has made mistakes, but stealing? From her own sister? From money meant for my treatment." "I hope I'm wrong," I said, not believing it for a second. But there was no break-in. The shopping bags at Matt's apartment, the way they reacted when I confronted them. "Maybe there's an explanation," Mom suggested. "Rachel called me this morning very upset. She said you accused her of theft and embarrassed her in front of her boyfriend." My stomach dropped. Rachel had already started her campaign. Did she mention the new laptop? "The designer clothes?" I asked. "She said Matt got a promotion," Mom replied. "Cassie, please talk to her calmly. We can't have the family torn apart. Not while I'm fighting this cancer." Next, I called my brother Tyler, who lived on the West Coast with his wife and children. Tyler and I had never been as close as Rachel and I, partly due to the 7-year age gap between us. He had left for college when Rachel was still in elementary school, escaping the fallout of our parents' divorce. "Slow down, Cassandra," he said after I explained the situation. "This sounds insane. Rachel's always been irresponsible with money, but stealing? From you? From Mom's cancer fund." "I know how it sounds," I replied, frustration building. "But you haven't been here, Tyler. You haven't seen how she's changed, the people she's hanging around with now. Look, I'm flying in next week to see Mom anyway. Let's have a family meeting and sort this out. There has to be a reasonable explanation." The family meeting was set for the following Sunday at Mom's house. I spent the intervening days documenting everything, taking photos of the empty safe, gathering bank statements, showing my purchase of the securities, even recording a statement from my financial advisor confirming their existence and value. When Sunday arrived, I was prepared for a difficult conversation but determined to address the situation head-on. What I wasn't prepared for was Rachel's performance. She arrived with Matt, both dressed conservatively, looking solemn and concerned. She immediately went to Mom, helping her to a comfortable chair, adjusting her pillows with exaggerated care. Tyler arrived with his wife Jessica, giving me a brief, uncertain hug before taking a seat. The tension in the room was suffocating. "I think Cassandra called this meeting," Mom said finally, "so perhaps she should start." I laid out the facts as clearly and unemotionally as I could, showing the documentation I had prepared. As I spoke, Rachel's expression transformed from concerned to hurt to indignant. When I finished, she looked at Mom with tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe this is happening," she sobbed. "Cassandra, tell them the truth. Tell them you promised to help me start my business. Tell them you changed your mind and now you're trying to frame me rather than admit you broke your promise." "What business?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Rachel, you've never mentioned wanting to start a business." "See." She turned to Tyler. "She does this all the time. She controls everything with money, makes promises, then denies it later. She's been doing this our whole lives." Matt nodded supportively. "I've seen it firsthand. Rachel was so excited when Cassandra offered to invest in her boutique idea. We've been scouting locations based on her promise. That never happened," I said, looking at my family's faces, shocked to see doubt in their eyes. "Mom, Tyler, you can't possibly believe this." "Then how did Rachel get into your safe?" Tyler asked. "If she stole from you, how did she get the combination?" "I don't know," I admitted. "That's what doesn't make sense." "Or maybe," Rachel said, wiping her tears, "there's a simpler explanation. Maybe you gave me access to those funds like you promised, and now you're having regrets and trying to paint me as a thief." "Why would I do that?" I demanded. Why would I sabotage Mom's cancer treatment? Because you've always needed to be the hero, Rachel replied, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. The responsible one. The one who sacrifices. Maybe you realized giving me that money meant you wouldn't get the credit for saving Mom. Mom looked between us, confusion and pain etched on her face. Girls, please. There has to be a way to resolve this without these accusations. There is, Rachel said. Cassandra can admit what she did, and we can move forward as a family. I looked at Tyler, hoping for support, but saw only uncertainty in his eyes. Cass, is there any possibility you did promise Rachel this money and forgot? Or maybe said something she could have misinterpreted? No. I stood up, feeling cornered. This is insane. She's lying to all of you. See how she gets when confronted, Rachel said quietly. This is what I've dealt with my whole life. The financial abuse, the control, the manipulation. Financial abuse. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've supported you for years. I paid your rent, your car payments, let you live in my home rent-free, and held it over my head every chance you got, Rachel countered. Made me feel worthless, dependent. The meeting deteriorated from there. By the end, Mom was in tears. Tyler was suggesting I seek therapy for control issues. And Rachel had somehow positioned herself as the victim of my financial manipulation. As they were leaving, Rachel introduced a new group of friends who had been waiting outside, people I'd never met, who gave me cold looks. These are my real support system, she announced. People who believe in me and my business vision. That night, I received a call from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in months. Is it true what Rachel's saying about you? She asked, without preamble. That you're having some kind of breakdown and accusing her of theft because you don't want to honor your investment promise. It was then I realized Rachel's campaign against me had begun long before the theft. She had been laying groundwork, telling family members and mutual friends stories about my controlling behavior and mental health issues for months. When I checked social media, I found posts dating back weeks with subtle hints. Sometimes the people who seem most put together are the ones falling apart behind closed doors. And pray for my sister, she's going through something she won't talk about. She had been setting the stage all along, ensuring that when she finally made her move, no one would believe my side of the story. The next morning, I attempted to file a police report. The officer listened patiently but ultimately shook his head. Miss Morgan, this sounds like a family dispute. If you gave your sister access to your safe and are now having second thoughts, that's a civil matter, not criminal. I didn't give her access. I insisted. Do you have any proof she took the securities? Witnesses? Video footage? I didn't. And as I left the police station, I realized I was fighting a battle where all the odds had been carefully stacked against me. The morning after the disastrous family meeting, I received an automated alert from my bank. Unusual activity detected on your account. When I logged in, my blood ran cold. My checking account, which had held just over $15,000, was down to $240. My savings account showed a transfer of $32,000 to an external account I didn't recognize, completed just hours earlier. Panicking, I called the bank's fraud department. The representative confirmed that the transfers had been authorized using my correct password and the answers to my security questions. When I protested that I hadn't made these transfers, she placed a temporary freeze on my accounts and advised me to come to a branch in person with identification. Before I could even grab my purse, my phone pinged with credit card alerts. My Visa card had just been charged $5,000 at an electronics store. My Amex showed a $7,800 charge at a luxury jewelry retailer. Both transactions had occurred within minutes of each other at a mall 30 miles away. As I rushed to the bank, another realization hit me. Rachel had lived in my house for nearly a year. She knew where I kept important documents. She would have had ample opportunity to find my social security card, birth certificate, even my passport. If she had those, along with access to my computer. The bank branch manager, Mr. Peterson, listened sympathetically to my story. I'm sorry to say this isn't unusual, Miss Morgan. Family fraud is one of the fastest-growing types of identity theft, precisely because family members have access to personal information. "Can you reverse the transfers?" I asked desperately. "We can try," he said. "But if the receiving accounts have already been emptied, there may be nothing to recover. I have to warn you, if these transfers were authorized using your correct credentials, the bank may not be liable." The credit card companies were somewhat more helpful, placing fraud alerts on my accounts and promising investigations, but warned that disputes could take weeks to resolve. In the meantime, my available credit was effectively zero. Back at home, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by financial statements and a growing list of devastating discoveries. Rachel hadn't just taken the securities, she had systematically dismantled my entire financial life. My emergency fund was gone. My credit cards were maxed out. And with mounting horror, I realized my next mortgage payment would bounce unless I could find funds quickly. Mom's cancer treatment was scheduled to begin in earnest the following month. The experimental therapy her doctor recommended required a substantial deposit before they would even schedule the procedure. The money I had so carefully set aside for her care had vanished. I called my financial advisor, hoping against hope that there might be some way to stop Rachel from liquidating the government securities. "I'm so sorry, Cassandra," he said, after hearing my story. "The securities themselves are protected in the sense that they can only be redeemed by the registered owner, you. But if she has your identification documents and personal information, she could potentially impersonate you. We should contact the Treasury Department immediately." Next, I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in fraud cases. Her assessment was blunt and discouraging. "Family theft cases are extremely difficult to prosecute," she explained. "The burden of proof is high, and without concrete evidence that Rachel took the securities without permission, it becomes a case of she said, she said. If she's already convincing family members that you gave her permission, a prosecutor might be reluctant to pursue charges." Meanwhile, my professional life began to suffer. As a senior financial analyst, my job required focus and precision. But how could I concentrate on investment strategies for clients when my own financial life was in shambles? I began making small errors in reports. My response time to emails lagged. Colleagues noticed my red-rimmed eyes and distracted demeanor. 2 weeks after discovering the theft, my boss William called me into his office. "Cassandra, your work has always been exemplary," he began, his tone concerned. "But lately, is everything okay? The Davidson portfolio analysis had 3 calculation errors, and you missed the Johnson conference call entirely." I considered maintaining a professional facade, but exhaustion won out. I gave him a condensed version of what had happened. "I'm trying to handle it," I assured him. "I just need a little time to get things sorted out." William's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Take the time you need, but I have to be clear, if your performance doesn't improve by the end of the month, we'll need to revisit your client assignments. This firm's reputation depends on accuracy and reliability." It was fair, but still another blow. Without my job, I would lose not just my income but my health insurance, which I had extended to cover my mother. That evening, my friend Heather came over with takeout and wine after I'd missed our 3rd dinner plan in a row. "You're not answering texts, you look like you haven't slept in days, and your car has been in the same spot all week," she said, setting down bags of Chinese food. "Talk to me." Over lo mein and cheap Cabernet. I told her everything: the theft, Rachel's manipulation, the family's disbelief, my mounting financial crisis. "Stay with me," Heather offered immediately. "At least for a while. You shouldn't be alone dealing with this." "I can't leave the house," I protested. "What if Rachel comes back? What if she takes what little I have left?" "What's left to take?" Heather asked gently. "And more importantly, what's left to protect by staying here alone, running yourself into the ground?" She had a point. The next day, I packed some clothes and essential documents and moved into Heather's spare bedroom. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it gave me space to think clearly for the first time since the nightmare began. That clarity came just in time. While scrolling through social media that evening, something I had avoided in recent weeks, I was stunned to see Rachel's posts. There she was, showing off a new car with the caption, Level up. New business ventures mean new rides. Another photo showed her on a beach that looked suspiciously like the Bahamas, cocktail in hand, with Matt and several friends I didn't recognize. My sister was flaunting her theft on Instagram while my mother's cancer treatment hung in the balance, my professional reputation teetered on the edge, and my financial future lay in ruins. Something inside me hardened with resolve. If the system wouldn't help me, I would have to find another way to fight back. After seeing Rachel's social media posts flaunting her new lifestyle, I realized I needed professional help to gather evidence. Through a colleague, I connected with Frank Delgado, a private investigator with experience in financial fraud cases. Family theft is complicated, Frank explained during our first meeting at Heather's apartment. Emotional ties cloud judgment, and perpetrators know their victims' vulnerabilities intimately. We need to approach this methodically. Frank's fee wasn't cheap, $2,000 up front plus expenses, but Heather loaned me the money, understanding that without evidence, I would never recover what was stolen. Frank began by investigating Rachel's boyfriend Matt, since I had less emotional attachment to him and could think more clearly about his involvement. Within 3 days, Frank had compiled a disturbing dossier. Matthew Reese, born Matthew Dolan, Frank reported. Changed his name after a fraud conviction in 2017. He has a pattern. Targeting vulnerable women with access to financial resources, establishing relationships, then disappearing once he's extracted maximum value. Rachel isn't vulnerable, I pointed out. She's the perpetrator here, or she's both, Frank suggested. From what you've told me, she has a history of financial instability and resentment toward you. That makes her the perfect mark for someone like Matt who can exploit her vulnerabilities while directing her grievances toward a profitable target. This perspective gave me pause. Had Rachel been manipulated by Matt? The thought offered a momentary comfort until Frank continued. However, the timeline suggests this wasn't a hasty scheme. I've tracked Matt's rental history, and he signed the lease on his current apartment 8 months ago, just a few weeks after meeting Rachel. The rent is $3,200 monthly for a luxury unit. On paper, he works as a business consultant with no fixed employer. 8 months. That meant they had been planning this while Rachel was still living in my house, eating meals I cooked, accepting my support. The betrayal cut deeper. Frank's next discovery was even more disturbing. While examining Rachel's abandoned belongings in my garage, he found a personal diary hidden inside a box of old college textbooks. The most recent entries detailed my daily habits with unsettling precision. 7:15 a.m. Cassandra checks her investments while drinking coffee. Password written in planner in desk drawer. Combination might be Mom's birthday. She mumbled it once while half asleep after I put the Ambien in her tea. The diary confirmed my worst fears. Rachel had been systematically drugging me with sleeping pills, then asking me questions while I was in a sedated state. I had occasionally found myself unusually groggy in the mornings during her stay, but had attributed it to stress and overwork. Frank's investigation also revealed a third conspirator. Jessica Landers, a woman who had recently befriended Rachel and, coincidentally, worked as a customer service representative at my bank. A background check revealed she had been fired from 2 previous financial institutions for policy violations that were never reported to authorities. They had inside help, Frank concluded. Jessica would have knowledge of bank security protocols, override capabilities for fraud detection, and possibly the ability to bypass certain verification steps. The scheme was beginning to make terrifying sense. Rachel, living in my home, gathering personal information and security details. Matt, the experienced fraudster, providing the criminal expertise. Jessica, the inside accomplice at the bank, helping to circumvent security measures. As Frank continued digging, he discovered something that sent chills down my spine. A rental storage unit contracted in my name, paid for with a credit card I didn't recognize. Inside, he found a passport with my photo but another name, credit cards issued to this alias, and printouts of information about banks in the Cayman Islands. They weren't just after what you had, Frank said gravely. They were setting up for a complete identity takeover. With these documents, Rachel could have continued draining resources you don't even know. You have yet future inheritances, insurance payouts, even accessing accounts you might open years from now. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or an impulsive theft. It was a calculated, long-term strategy to not just steal from me once but to keep stealing indefinitely. While processing these revelations, I received an anonymous text message. "Back off if you know what's good for you. Some things are better left alone." I showed Frank, who advised documenting everything but not responding. "They're getting nervous," he said. "That means we're on the right track." The next morning, I walked out to my driveway to find my car vandalized. The word "liar" had been scratched into the hood, and all 4 tires were slashed. Tucked under the windshield wiper was a note. "Next time it won't be just the car." For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt genuinely afraid for my physical safety. This was no longer just about money. Rachel, Matt, and whoever else they were working with were sending a clear message that they would escalate if I continued to pursue them. The local police took a report about the vandalism but offered little hope of identifying the perpetrators without witnesses or surveillance footage. "Best to park in a garage from now on," the officer suggested unhelpfully. That night, as Heather and I discussed the day's events over dinner, a chilling thought occurred to me. If Rachel drugged me to get information, I said slowly, what else might she have done while I was unconscious? What if there are hidden cameras in my house? What if she made recordings of me that could be edited to support her story? Heather's expression turned grim. "You need to sweep your house. And you need to stop thinking of this as just recovering your money. You're fighting for your reputation, your safety, and your future." She was right. The stakes had escalated far beyond the missing securities. I was up against a sophisticated conspiracy orchestrated by the person who knew me better than anyone in the world, targeting not just my finances but potentially my freedom. The threatening messages and vandalism made one thing abundantly clear. Rachel and her accomplices would not stop voluntarily. They would keep coming after me until they had taken everything, or until I stopped them. It was time to fight back with everything I had. The morning after my car was vandalized, I called an emergency strategy meeting at Heather's apartment. Attending were Frank Delgado, the private investigator, Patricia Winters, a lawyer specializing in fraud cases, and Michael Grayson, my financial advisor. Also present was Heather, whose guest room had become my sanctuary in the chaos. "We need a comprehensive approach," Patricia began, spreading files across Heather's dining table. "Criminal charges, civil litigation, financial recovery, and personal security, all running concurrently." Michael nodded grimly. "Priority 1 is stopping any further financial bleeding. We've already frozen your credit, but we need to go deeper." The team helped me develop a multi-pronged strategy that felt like preparing for war. Financial containment. "Your credit is frozen, but we need to contact every financial institution individually," Michael explained. "Banks, investment firms, retirement accounts, even places where you don't currently have accounts but might in the future." We spent 3 hours making calls, creating new security protocols that would require in-person verification for any transactions, and establishing verbal passwords that couldn't be found in any document Rachel might have accessed. "Now for the securities," Michael continued. "I've already contacted the Treasury Department, but we need to formalize the fraud report." The Treasury Department representative was initially skeptical but became more engaged when we faxed Rachel's diary entries describing her plan to impersonate me. "This is unusual," the agent admitted. "Most family fraud cases don't have this level of documentation." "Well, place a special monitoring flag on your Treasury Direct account and any securities registered in your name." Legal offensive. Patricia helped me prepare a comprehensive police report that went far beyond my initial attempt. This time, we brought Frank's evidence: the diary, photos of the storage unit with false identification documents, and background information on Matt's prior fraud convictions. "Don't expect immediate action," Patricia warned, "but establishing the paper trail is crucial for what comes next." We also filed for a temporary restraining order against Rachel, Matt, and Jessica, not because we think they'll obey it, Patricia explained, but because violating a court order creates additional charges we can leverage. The most challenging part was gathering evidence without tipping our hand. Frank had been conducting surveillance on Rachel and Matt, documenting their movements and spending patterns. They had already made one critical mistake using my stolen funds for visible purchases rather than hiding the money. "They're amateurs," Frank noted. "Sophisticated criminals don't buy luxury cars and post about them on Instagram. They're leaving a trail we can follow." Alliance building. The most painful step was reaching out to family members who had sided with Rachel. I started with my mother, visiting her alone at her apartment. "Mom, I know you want to believe both your daughters," I said gently, taking her frail hand in mine. "But I need to show you something." I showed her the diary entries where Rachel detailed drugging me, the photos of the false identification documents, and the background check on Matt. My mother read in silence, her face growing paler with each page. When she finished, she looked up with tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered. "Not my baby girl, not Rachel." "I didn't either, Mom," I said, my own tears falling. "But I need your help now. Not just for me, but for your treatment. The money she took was meant to save your life." That evening, Mom called Rachel, with Patricia and Frank present in my mother's apartment. Following our plan, she expressed concern about Matt's background and mentioned casually that she had found some old papers of Cassandra's related to the Securities. Rachel's reaction was immediate and revealing. "Don't touch those. I mean, what papers? You shouldn't be going through Cassandra's things." "I'm just worried about my treatment, honey," Mom said, her voice trembling with genuine emotion. "Cassandra says the money is gone." "She's lying," Rachel snapped. "She's just trying to turn you against me. She's always been jealous that you loved me more." "But why would she lie about something so serious?" Mom pressed. Rachel's voice changed, becoming colder. "Look, just stay out of it, okay? It'll come by tomorrow and we can talk about it then." After the call ended, Mom sat in stunned silence. "That wasn't my daughter," she finally said. "I don't know who that was." The next call was to my brother Tyler. Initially defensive, he agreed to video chat with me and review the evidence. "Jesus, Cass," he said after I walked him through everything we'd discovered. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. Rachel was just so convincing. She's had a lifetime of practice manipulating people," I said, feeling a strange mix of sadness and vindication. "But I need you on my side now, Tyler. This is going to get uglier before it gets better." With my immediate family now supporting me, we expanded the circle carefully, sharing selective information with trusted extended family members and close friends. The goal wasn't to publicly shame Rachel, yet that would come later, but to neutralize her support network. Security measures. Frank arranged for a team to sweep my house for surveillance devices. They found 3 hidden cameras, one in the living room, one in my bedroom, and one aimed directly at my desk where I often worked on financial matters. "They were streaming to a cloud server," Frank reported. "We've disconnected them, but we can't be sure what footage they already captured." We also installed a new security system with cameras covering every approach to my house, set up with real-time alerts to my phone and Frank's office. For my personal safety, Frank recommended a temporary change in routine, different routes to work, varying departure times, and checking in with Heather or another ally at scheduled intervals. By the end of that long day of planning and implementation, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since discovering the empty safe. We had created a protective framework and begun to gather evidence. We had allies and expertise. Most importantly, we had truth on our side. That night, the Treasury Department called with our first real victory. They had flagged an attempt to redeem my securities at a branch in Miami. The transaction had been halted, and the securities frozen pending investigation. "The person used identification in your name," the agent informed me, but our new security protocol required additional verification questions that they couldn't answer. It wasn't a recovery yet, but it was the first time Rachel's plan had been thwarted. As small as this win was, it fueled my determination. She had initiated this war, but I would be the one to finish it. I knew Rachel wouldn't surrender easily, but I underestimated how quickly and viciously she would strike back once she realized her initial plans were being foiled. 3 days after we blocked the Securities redemption, I was served with legal papers at work. Rachel had filed for a restraining order against me, claiming I had been harassing her with hundreds of threatening messages and stalking her at her home and workplace. The petition was filled with detailed fabrications, conversations that never happened, threats I never made, encounters that never took place. She had even included screenshots of text messages that appeared to come from my number but contained words I had never written. Spoofed texts. Frank explained when I called him in a panic. There are apps that can send messages appearing to come from any number. It's another sign they're getting desperate. Patricia rushed to file our opposition, complete with phone records showing I had only called Rachel once the day I discovered the theft and documentation of my whereabouts during the times she claimed I was stalking her. But the damage to my professional reputation was immediate. Being served legal papers at my office created a spectacle that fueled workplace gossip. My boss, William, called me into his office that afternoon. "Cassandra, I've tried to be understanding about your personal situation," he began, his expression uncomfortable. "But when it starts affecting the workplace environment and potentially our firm's reputation, it's not what it looks like," I said desperately. "My sister is trying to discredit me because I caught her stealing from me." William sighed. "I'd like to believe you, but this is becoming a pattern of instability. I'm going to need you to take a paid leave of absence until these matters are resolved." It wasn't a firing, but it felt like one. I cleaned out my desk that evening, avoiding eye contact with curious colleagues. The next blow came the following morning. A local news channel ran a segment titled, "Family Financial Dispute Turns Ugly," featuring a tearful interview with Rachel. "My sister has always controlled the family with money," she told the sympathetic reporter. "When I finally stood up for myself and tried to become financially independent, she just snapped." Rachel described me as mentally unstable, claiming I had a history of paranoid episodes and had become obsessed with the idea that everyone is stealing from her. She even suggested that our mother's cancer diagnosis had triggered a psychological break. Watching her performance, the carefully timed tears, the concerned expression, the practiced vulnerability, I felt physically ill. This was the sister I had raised, the girl I had protected, the woman I had supported through countless crises. Now she was systematically destroying my life on local television. The fallout was immediate. My phone exploded with messages from distant relatives, old friends, even former classmates, some expressing concern for my mental health. Others condemning me for tormenting my poor sister during our mother's illness. Rachel's campaign extended beyond media. That afternoon, my mother called in a panic. Someone had accessed her medical records and scheduled an appointment cancellation for her upcoming treatment. The hospital called to confirm I wanted to cancel, she said, her voice shaking. "I never called them, Cassie. I never canceled anything." We immediately contacted her oncologist, who helped secure her medical records with additional protections. But the message was clear. Rachel was willing to endanger our mother's life to maintain her leverage. Later that day, Mom received a text from an unknown number. "Families should stick together. Choosing the wrong side has consequences." Frank increased security measures around my mother's apartment, installing cameras and arranging for a part-time caregiver who could also serve as a witness to any unusual activities. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I received a call from a former colleague at my investment firm. "Cassandra, I shouldn't be telling you this," she whispered, "but someone called the compliance hotline. They're alleging you've been embezzling from client accounts to fund a gambling addiction." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about discrediting me personally anymore. Rachel was trying to destroy my professional reputation and potentially set me up for criminal charges. Patricia immediately contacted the firm's legal department to inform them of the ongoing situation and the pattern of false allegations, but the damage was done. An internal investigation had already begun, and even if I was eventually cleared, the stain on my record would be permanent. That night, I returned to my house to collect more belongings, accompanied by Frank as a precaution. We found the front door unlocked and slightly ajar. "Stay behind me," Frank instructed, drawing a weapon I didn't know he carried. The interior had been ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied, walls defaced. But this wasn't a typical burglary. The damage was targeted at personal items: family photos smashed, keepsakes destroyed, my diplomas and professional certifications torn from their frames. Most alarmingly, the file cabinet where I kept evidence of Rachel's fraud had been broken into, and several key documents were missing, including statements showing my purchase of the securities and copies of police reports. "They're trying to eliminate evidence," Frank said grimly, photographing the damage. "But they don't know we've digitized everything and secured it in multiple locations." As we were about to leave, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Had enough yet?" a disguised voice asked when I answered. "This can stop any time. Just drop everything, admit you're having mental health issues, and we all move on with our lives." "Who is this?" I demanded, though I already knew. "Someone who can make things much worse," the voice replied before hanging up. That night, staying at Heather's apartment with the blinds drawn and an extra lock installed on her door, I faced my darkest moment. Rachel had outmaneuvered me at every turn. She had turned family against me, damaged my professional reputation, threatened our mother's health care, and now was coming after the evidence that could exonerate me. For a brief, terrible moment, I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to walk away, start over somewhere new, rebuild from nothing. Then I remembered the diary entries where Rachel detailed drugging me. I thought about the calculated way she had exploited our mother's illness. I recalled the years I had spent supporting her, believing in her, sacrificing for her. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth, justice, and ensuring that someone who could betray family so completely would not get away with it. I called Patricia, Frank, and Michael for an emergency conference call. "They're escalating because they're afraid," I said. "Which means we must be closer to stopping them than we realize. I need options, not just defensive moves, but ways to end this definitively." As we strategized into the early hours, a text arrived from an unfamiliar number. "Not everyone on Team Rachel is as committed as she thinks. Storage Unit 352, Westlake Facility. Key under the blue dumpster. Go alone tomorrow at 3 p.m. if you want something that will end this." It could be a trap, but it could also be our first real chance to turn the tide. The text message about the storage unit presented an agonizing dilemma. It could be a legitimate tip from someone in Rachel's circle who'd developed a conscience, or it could be an elaborate trap to lure me into a vulnerable position. Absolutely not. Frank declared when I mentioned going to the storage facility. "Best case scenario, it's empty and you've wasted time. Worst case, you're walking into an ambush." But something about the message felt authentic. The specificity of the unit number, the hidden key location, the timing that coincided with what we knew was Matt's weekly physical therapy appointment following an old sports injury. "What if it's the actual diary?" I pressed. "The original, not just the pages we found. Or what if there's other evidence we don't even know about?" After heated debate, we compromised. Frank would go to the storage facility first to surveil the area, while Patricia's assistant would be stationed nearby as an additional witness. I would wait in Frank's car until he confirmed it was reasonably safe. At 2:45 p.m. the next day, we put the plan into action. Frank spent 30 minutes circling the facility, checking for suspicious vehicles or people. Finding nothing obvious, he located the blue dumpster and, using gloves, retrieved a key taped underneath. "Unit 352 is in the back corner, minimal foot traffic, one security camera covering that section," he reported via phone. "I don't see anyone watching, but that doesn't mean they're not there." At precisely 3 p.m., with Frank providing cover from a distance, I approached the storage unit. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. The lock clicked open, and I raised the rolling door just enough to slip inside, then closed it behind me. The musty space was illuminated only by a small window near the ceiling. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I made out a stack of plastic bins along one wall, a filing cabinet, and a desk with a laptop computer. The first bin contained what looked like Rachel's actual diary, not just the few pages we'd found, but a comprehensive record dating back years. Flipping through it, I found entries detailing not just her plans to steal from me, but her long-standing resentment and the origins of her scheme. Cassandra always thinks she's so perfect. One entry read, "Always the responsible one, the successful one. She has no idea what it's like to struggle. Matt says we can fix that. Matt says she deserves what's coming." Other entries were even more disturbing. Detailed notes on how to manipulate our mother, use her fear of abandonment, strategies for turning my brother against me, remind him how Cassandra always got more attention, and explicit plans for how to spend my stolen money. The second bin contained something even more valuable, a laptop and external hard drive. When I opened the laptop, it was password protected, but a sticky note on the bottom had MR1988 written on it, likely Matt's birth year. The password worked, and what I found made my heart race. Folders meticulously labeled with my name, my mother's name, even Tyler's. Inside were spreadsheets tracking our finances, copies of documents stolen from my house, and recordings, dozens of them. One video showed Rachel and Matt in my kitchen, laughing as she mixed something into a mug of tea. "Sleeping Beauty won't remember a thing," Rachel said to the camera. Another showed Rachel practicing my signature, while Matt coached her on mimicking my handwriting. But the most damning evidence was a recorded conversation between Rachel, Matt, and Jessica, discussing how to liquidate the securities. "Once we convert these, we need to move fast," Matt was saying. "Offshore accounts first. Then the property in Belize. 3 months max and we're out of the country." "What about my mother's treatment?" Rachel asked, sounding genuinely concerned. "What about it?" Matt replied coldly. "That's Cassandra's problem, not yours. You think she'd pay for your medical bills if roles were reversed." The conversation revealed the full extent of their plan: steal my identity, liquidate my assets, transfer the funds internationally, and disappear, leaving me financially ruined, professionally discredited, and potentially facing criminal charges for the financial irregularities they had created in my name. As I hurriedly copied files to a USB drive I carried, the storage unit door suddenly rolled up. I spun around, expecting to face Rachel or Matt, but instead found a young woman I recognized from Rachel's social media photos, Zoe, one of her new friends. "You got my text," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "I can't stay long." "Matt doesn't know I have the key. Why are you helping me?" I asked, still wary. "Because I didn't sign up for this," she replied. "Rachel told me her sister was financially abusive, and we were just helping her get what she deserved. But then I overheard Matt talking about your mom's cancer treatment, how they were going to let her die to protect their plan. That's evil." Zoe explained that she'd been dating Matt's friend and got pulled into their social circle 6 months ago. Initially impressed by Rachel's stories of standing up to a controlling sister, she had only recently begun to see inconsistencies in their narrative. "There's something else you should know," Zoe added, lowering her voice. "They're planning to empty your mother's house tomorrow while she's at her doctor's appointment. They have a moving truck rented and everything. They're taking her jewelry, her antiques, anything valuable." With Zoe's help, I photographed and copied as much evidence as possible. She also provided a statement on video, detailing what she knew about the scheme and the extent of everyone's involvement. Before leaving, Zoe gave me one final piece of information. "They're meeting tonight at Jessica's apartment to finalize everything. 8 o'clock. Rachel doesn't know I know about it." Armed with this treasure trove of evidence, I contacted Patricia and Frank immediately. Patricia began preparing emergency court filings, while Frank coordinated with his contacts at the police department. By 7 p.m., we had assembled a formidable team: Detective Daniel Warren, my childhood friend who now worked in the Financial Crimes Unit, 2 officers from the regular police force, representatives from the Treasury Department who had been monitoring the securities situation, and a forensic computer specialist to verify the digital evidence. At precisely 8:15 p.m., while Rachel, Matt, and Jessica were meeting, officers executed a search warrant at Jessica's apartment. The timing was perfect. They were literally gathered around a table with my financial documents, fake IDs, and a whiteboard outlining the final steps of their plan. The evidence was overwhelming, and their reactions were telling. Jessica immediately asked for a lawyer. Matt attempted to flee through a back window but was apprehended in the parking lot. And Rachel looked directly at me as she was being handcuffed and said, "You were always Mom's favorite. Always the perfect daughter. I just wanted what you had." While the arrests were being processed, another team secured Matt's apartment, recovering additional evidence including nearly $50,000 in cash, hidden in a ventilation duct, likely my emergency funds from the safe. The next morning, Detective Warren called with surprising news. We found most of the securities. They were in a safe deposit box at First National, registered under your name but accessed with false ID. The Treasury Department is working to restore them to your control. It wasn't a complete recovery. Some money had already been spent on Rachel's shopping sprees and Matt's new car, but it was enough to ensure my mother's treatment could proceed as planned. The most unexpected development came that afternoon. While being questioned separately, Matt apparently realized he was facing serious charges and decided to save himself. He offered a full confession, implicating Rachel as the mastermind and detailing how she had been planning the theft for over a year. "She came to me with the idea," Matt told investigators according to Detective Warren. "She knew everything about her sister's finances, her habits, her weaknesses. All she needed was someone who knew how to convert the assets without raising flags. That's where I came in." When confronted with Matt's confession, Rachel finally broke down. In a recorded interview, she admitted to drugging me, stealing my financial information, and orchestrating the entire scheme. "I was tired of being the family failure," she sobbed. "Tired of depending on Cassandra's charity. She had everything, the career, the house, Mom's approval. I just wanted to be the successful one for once." The recording was difficult to watch my sister, broken and defeated, finally revealing the depths of resentment she had harbored for years. But it was the evidence we needed to ensure justice would be served. As news of the arrests spread, the tide of public opinion began to shift. Family members who had believed Rachel's lies reached out with apologies. My employer called to discuss my return, the internal investigation having cleared me completely once they understood the situation. Most importantly, my mother's treatment was secured. The recovered securities would cover the experimental therapy her doctor recommended, giving her the best possible chance at recovery. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The nightmare wasn't over. There would be trials, testimony, and the long process of rebuilding my financial life, but the immediate danger had passed. Rachel could no longer hurt me, my mother, or anyone else from behind bars. That evening, sitting in Heather's apartment with Frank, Patricia, and Detective Warren, I raised a glass in quiet celebration. "To justice," Frank said. "To the truth," added Patricia. "To starting over," I concluded, feeling the weight of months of fear and anger beginning to lift. The betrayal would always be part of my story, but it would no longer define my future. The legal proceedings against Rachel, Matt, and Jessica unfolded over the next 8 months, a painfully public process that laid bare every detail of their scheme and my family's dysfunction. Rachel faced multiple felony charges: grand theft, identity theft, fraud, forgery, and elder abuse for the threats against our mother's medical care. The preliminary hearing was the first time I saw Rachel in court, dressed in a standard-issue jumpsuit instead of her usual designer clothes. She kept her eyes down, avoiding my gaze until the moment she was led past my seat. Only then did she look up, her expression an unsettling mixture of defiance and desperation. "She's hoping for a plea deal," Patricia whispered to me. "But with the evidence we have, the prosecutor isn't feeling generous." Matt proved himself a quintessential coward, immediately offering to testify against Rachel and Jessica in exchange for reduced charges. Jessica, the bank employee who had facilitated much of the financial fraud, followed suit, creating a scenario where each defendant was frantically incriminating the others. Throughout the proceedings, I sat in the courtroom 3 days a week, listening to the clinical dissection of my sister's betrayal. Psychological experts testified about Rachel's narcissistic tendencies and pathological jealousy. Financial specialists detailed the elaborate mechanisms they had used to access and transfer my assets. Most difficult to hear was the recording of Rachel explaining her motivations to investigators. Cassandra always had everything handed to her. Sure, she worked hard, but she had the opportunities. I was just leveling the playing field. The prosecutor had looked directly at me when he played that recording, knowing how much it would hurt to hear Rachel rewrite our shared history so completely. The truth was that nothing had been handed to me. I had worked multiple jobs through college, delayed my own dreams to help raise Rachel, spent years building my career through long hours and constant learning. The narrative she had constructed of the privileged sister and the disadvantaged one was a fiction designed to justify her actions. After 3 months of hearings and negotiations, Rachel finally accepted a plea deal, 8 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 5, plus restitution for all stolen funds. Matt received 6 years for his role, while Jessica, who had cooperated most extensively, was sentenced to 3 years plus probation. The day of Rachel's sentencing, my mother attended court for the first time, her frail body weakened by chemotherapy but her spirit resolute. "The court recognizes Margaret Morgan," the judge announced. My mother stood slowly, supporting herself on a cane. "Your Honor, I am here today as the mother of both the victim and the defendant. What my daughter Rachel did was inexcusable, particularly the theft of funds intended for my cancer treatment. But I ask the court to consider that she is still my child and that rehabilitation should be part of her sentence." Rachel wept openly as our mother spoke, perhaps finally confronting the reality of what she had done not just to me, but to the woman who had raised us both with equal love and sacrifice. The financial aftermath was complicated but ultimately more positive than I had feared. The Treasury Department restored control of most of the securities to me, though about $80,000 worth had been liquidated and spent before we caught them. My bank reimbursed approximately 60% of the stolen funds after their investigation confirmed their employees' involvement. Matt's new car, Rachel's designer clothes, and other traceable purchases were seized and liquidated to contribute to restitution. The authorities even recovered $47,500 in cash from various hiding places in Matt's apartment and storage units. All told, I recovered about $420,000 of the original $500,000, enough to proceed with my mother's experimental treatment and maintain some financial security. Though my emergency fund and retirement planning had taken significant hits, my professional reputation required its own healing process. Though formally cleared of any wrongdoing, the whispers and sidelong glances continued when I returned to work. William, my boss, was supportive but candid. "People have short attention spans but long memories for scandal," he advised. "The best approach is to be exceptional at your job and let your work speak for itself." I took his advice to heart, arriving early, staying late, and delivering flawless analysis for my clients. Gradually, the curious looks faded, replaced by the professional respect I had earned before this nightmare began. My personal life proved more challenging to reconstruct. The experience had left me with profound trust issues that extended beyond family to all relationships. I found myself questioning people's motives, scanning for inconsistencies in their stories, holding everyone at a safe emotional distance. After 3 months of this exhausting hypervigilance, Heather staged an intervention. "You need therapy, Cass," she said bluntly over coffee one morning. "Not because there's something wrong with you, but because what happened would break anyone. You need professional help to process this betrayal." She was right. I began seeing Dr. Ellis, a trauma specialist, twice weekly. Our sessions were often painful as I worked through the layers of betrayal, grief, and anger. What you're experiencing is similar to post-traumatic stress, Dr. Ellis explained. Your sense of safety in the world was fundamentally violated by someone you trusted implicitly. Healing from that requires rebuilding your belief system from the ground up. Through therapy, I came to understand that Rachel's actions reflected her pathology, not my worthiness of trust or love. I learned to separate hypervigilance from healthy caution, to recognize when fear was driving my decisions rather than wisdom. 6 months after Rachel's sentencing, I felt stable enough to visit her in prison. Patricia thought it was premature, Doctor. Ellis was cautiously supportive, and Heather thought I was crazy. But I needed to look my sister in the eye, not for closure or reconciliation, but to reclaim my power in our relationship. The visiting room was stark and institutional, with bolted-down furniture and guards stationed at regular intervals. Rachel entered looking thinner, her designer confidence replaced by a subdued wariness. For several minutes, we sat in uncomfortable silence. "Why did you come?" she finally asked. "Not for you," I replied honestly. "For me. I needed to see you and know that you no longer have power over my life." She nodded slowly. "I've been in therapy too. They say I have narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial features. Apparently, I lack empathy." She laughed bitterly. "As if I needed a diagnosis to tell me I'm broken." "We're all broken in some way," I said. "The difference is whether we try to heal ourselves or hurt others instead." We talked for the allowed 30 minutes, not about reconciliation or forgiveness, those were still far beyond my capacity, but about the mechanics of moving forward. I informed her that our mother's treatment was progressing well, that Tyler visited her regularly, that the family was healing despite her best efforts to destroy it. As I stood to leave, Rachel asked, "Will you come back?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "That depends on many things, including whether you ever truly understand what you did." Walking out of the prison that day, I felt a shift inside me, not closure, which is simpler in movies than in real life, but a recognition of my own resilience. Rachel had tried to destroy everything I valued: my finances, my reputation, my family relationships, even my freedom. She had failed. Over the following year, life gradually normalized. My mother's experimental treatment proved more successful than we had dared hope, pushing her cancer into remission. I moved back into my house after a thorough renovation that erased the physical reminders of Rachel's invasion. My career rebounded, with a promotion that recognized my professionalism through adversity. New security measures became part of my routine. Regular credit monitoring, rotating complex passwords, a home security system with motion-activated cameras. Some might see these precautions as paranoia, but I recognized them as appropriate adaptations to a demonstrated threat. The most unexpected development in my recovery came through helping others. After a local news station ran a feature on my case as a cautionary tale about family fraud, I received dozens of messages from people experiencing similar situations. With Patricia's guidance, I began speaking at community centers and financial institutions about identity protection and the warning signs of familial financial abuse. Sharing my story helped transform it from a source of shame to a resource for others. Each time I spoke publicly about what happened, the emotional charge of the experience diminished slightly. 2 years after discovering my empty safe, I stood in my newly renovated home office, hanging framed certificates on the wall. My financial security was rebuilt, my mother was healthy, and my professional reputation was stronger than ever. The sister I had loved and trusted was serving her sentence, her betrayal now a scar rather than an open wound. I had learned that sometimes the people we protect the most are the ones we should guard against, but also that betrayal, however devastating, need not define us. True strength comes not from avoiding injury, but from rebuilding after devastation, creating something more resilient precisely because it has been broken and mended. The safe in my office was new, more sophisticated than its predecessor, its contents once again representing my hard work and careful planning. But the most valuable things I possessed couldn't be locked away in any vault: resilience, wisdom, and the knowledge that I could survive the worst betrayal and still reclaim my life. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild trust afterward? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember to hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the most important security system isn't the one protecting your valuables, but the boundaries you set with the people in your life.